problems with discipline. Some employees try your patience, pushing the rules to the limit until you feel you have no other choice but to, well, you get the picture. Unfortunately, if you don't take the wrong approach, the consequences of discipline can come back on your head. Properly used, discipline is a valuable supervisory tool which can correct undesirable behavior and improve poor performance. But in order to achieve these important results requires consistency and a controlled approach. Watch this next scene and decide how you'd handle this all too common employee discipline problem.
Why is he checking out now? It's not 3 o'clock.
Al Benson, Assembly.
This is Helen Crawford down at Southgate. Is Leonard Barstock an employee of yours?
Yes, he is.
I just saw him leaving the plant. I wondered if you were authorized.
Leaving? His shift isn't over till 3 o'clock.
Yeah, I thought it was strange, too. I looked at his card. His out time was penciled in for 3 o'clock with your initials after it. I was just calling to make sure.
But I never initialed his time card.
That's what I was afraid of.
Listen, thanks for calling. I'll check into it. Yeah, hi, this is Hal Benson in Assembly. Could you please send me up Leonard Barstock's time card for the past couple of months? Yeah, thank you.
How can this be? According to these time cards, Leonard has forged my initials 12 times. That's only going back 2 months. How long has this been going on?
So what I'm asking you is, did you do it?
Yeah, well, maybe a couple of times, yeah.
You sure just a couple of times?
Well, I'm not sure.
Well, let me tell you how many times. In the past 6 months, you falsified these time cards and forged my initials 20 times.
Well, yeah, I guess I could have done that, yeah.
Well, didn't you know it was against company policy? I mean, there's a sign right over the time clock.
So?
So you knew you were falsifying company records?
Yeah, I guess so.
And you know this was something you could be fired for?
Well, I didn't think I'd get caught. What am I gonna do? We're only talking about 4, maybe 5 hours shaved off the clock. I'm sure he made it up. I've seen him come in early plenty of times. I mean, it's not like he left his workstation untended. From what I understand, he always had someone cover for him. But if I let him get away with forging my initials on his time card, what kind of message would that send to my other employees?
That's a good question. What would you do if you were the supervisor in this case? On the one hand, this is the first time an otherwise good, long-term employee has been confronted with violating the rules, even though this was not his first offense. Should he be given a chance to prove whether or not he's willing to change his behavior and comply with the rules from now on? On the other hand, policies regarding attendance must be strictly enforced, and falsifying company records is a serious offense, serious enough to warrant discharge. You be the judge. Would you fire this employee? Take a few minutes and discuss this issue. We'll come back and we'll see what the supervisor did and what happened as a result of his action. what did you decide? The supervisor in this case decided to fire the employee. Unfortunately, that decision had negative repercussions. The employee challenged the firing. Let's hear what the arbitrator had to say in this case.
The employee in this case committed a serious offense, serious enough to justify severe discipline. He knew that a violation of the rule could lead to discharge. Company policy was very clear on this point. What's more, further investigation turned up over 145 instances in which he had falsified his time card. But, despite all the evidence against this employee, there is one element missing. That element is progressive discipline. This is a textbook example of a situation in which progressive discipline should have been used. Simply put, progressive discipline requires that you withhold the final penalty of discharge until it has been established that the employee is unlikely to respond to lesser discipline.
Leonard, I don't understand you. You're one of my best employees.
In this case, the employee might have responded to lesser discipline.
You broke the rules.
Suspension, for example, would have been appropriate. It would have served as a warning that any future violations of the same rule would lead to discharge.
I'm afraid there's nothing I can do but let you go. Go down and clean out your locker and go to personnel and pick up your termination pay.
But firing this veteran employee without any warning was too harsh. Now, in the absence of progressive discipline, I rule that Leonard Barstock be reinstated to his job with full seniority rights, but without back pay.
The supervisor in this case didn't take into account the purpose of discipline, which is to correct employee behavior. Once he discovered the violation, he should have used progressive discipline. As the arbitrator explained, the progressive method is the application of discipline in graduated steps. The severity of discipline increases as you advance through the steps. Steps can be repeated or skipped depending upon the seriousness of the violation and your company policy. Generally, progressive discipline begins with an informal discussion and then progresses to an oral warning, a written warning, then suspension, and finally, discharge. But of course, you have flexibility in choosing which steps of progressive discipline to use. You don't have to begin with step one every time. As we said before, depending on company policy and the gravity of a particular offense, you may often find it necessary to skip steps. In the case you just saw, for example, the supervisor would have been justified in imposing suspension as a first step. The offense was that serious. In the most extreme cases involving gross misconduct, immediate discharge may be justified. For example, serious safety violations that recklessly endanger the lives of others, illegal activities on the job, major theft of company property, bringing firearms onto company premises, and gross insubordination. Whether or not you followed progressive discipline by the letter or skipped steps, the key to effective discipline at every step is consistency. Now, this means applying similar discipline to employees in comparable circumstances. Keep in mind also that each disciplinary problem has to be handled separately. For instance, an employee who's already been suspended for an ongoing absenteeism problem wouldn't be fired because he broke a work rule unrelated to his absenteeism. Only if he had another absenteeism violation would he risk discharge. Let's take a look now at a variety of disciplinary situations to see how to use progressive discipline consistently and productively.
Hey, what's going on here? The guys out in the loading dock have been waiting for these boxes. What are you doing?
Well, I'm sorry. I was studying for a test tonight, and...
I think it's great that you're going to school, right? But you're paid to do a job here, and you're holding up production. Now, if it happens again, I'm going to have to give you a formal warning, and that'll go into your personnel file.
I'm really sorry. It took me 6 months...
For a first offense, an informal discussion is usually sufficient. To make sure your discussion is effective, Speak to the employee privately. Remind the employee of the rule that has been broken. Explain the reason for the rule. Listen to the employee's explanation. Counsel the employee about changing behavior or performance, and explain the consequences of future violations.
Now, I hope you don't have to speak again about this. I mean, I'm really counting on you.
Don't worry. Won't happen again.
No, I'm sorry. Thank you very much for calling.
There's no way I can send the two today.
Great, fine.
Sorry, but that's the way it is. I said you'll get it on Friday.
I really enjoy your products, and I hope you'll be back.
Well, that's the best I can do.
No, I'm sorry. Thank you very much for calling. I hope you'll be back soon.
You're a jerk!
What was that all about, Betty?
Just some customer giving me a hard time.
You know, I've spoken to you before about being rude to customers. This time I'm giving you an oral warning. Now, this company doesn't tolerate that kind of behavior.
You should have heard him.
I have heard them all.
In this case, the employee had already been warned about her
Your
attitude.
job.
Nevertheless, she persisted in being rude to customers.
Courteous service.
The supervisor advanced to the next step in progressive discipline, the oral warning.
Job.
For an oral warning to be successful, warn the employee formally concerning the repeated rule violation. Give the employee a chance to respond to the charge. Counsel the employee again about changing behavior or performance. Set goals or timetables for improvement. Explain the consequences of future violations, and keep a written record of the meeting for the employee's personnel file.
I'll try that. I really do want to do a good job here.
Oh, good, Betty. I'm really glad to hear that. Because we can't afford to lose any business because our reps are being rude to customers. Now, I want you to know that next week I'm going to be monitoring calls. You should also know that if I hear you being rude to a customer again, I'm going to give you a written warning.
Often, an oral warning is as far as you'll have to go in the disciplinary process. Most employees have a sincere desire to improve their performance, and they only need an occasional reminder to get back on the right track. Depending on your company's policy and the seriousness of the offense, you may decide to issue several oral warnings, or you may decide to go to the next step in the progressive discipline process, a written warning.
So those of you can get to me soon.
Oh, we'll be happy to get that for you, Mr. Smith.
Your service, and I hope you'll get back to me soon.
Absolutely. I'll call you in 2 days.
Well, I can't change that. You'll just have to live with it.
No, I won't. I'm taking my business elsewhere.
I'd hoped Betty's attitude would have improved by now. I can't let her go on being rude to customers. Hopefully she'll respond to a written warning.
This stage in progressive discipline, the written warning, is often a turning point. If you're going to be able to salvage an employee, this is usually the time. The written warning sends a loud and clear message to the employee that you're serious and you won't tolerate continued misbehavior.
Hi, Bill. I just wanted to check with you about that discipline problem.
This is also the time to consult your boss. Although the 2 previous steps may have been taken on your own initiative, from now on you should involve your superiors. Also, be sure to review company procedures for written warnings and follow those procedures exactly. You are now creating a written record on an employee's disciplinary history. It's a step that should not be taken lightly. Be sure to include these points in your formal written warning. Note the date and time of the offense, as well as the dates and times of each previous occurrence. Specify where the offense occurred. Was the employee at his or her workstation? If not, where? Be specific. Explain the details of the occurrence. Be objective in recording what took place. State the facts. Don't draw conclusions. Specify which rule was violated. It's a good idea to attach a copy of the rule to the written warning. This way, the employee can't turn around later and claim that he or she didn't know the rule existed.
Betty, I have filled in the date, your name, your department.
After you've filled out the form, go over it point by point with the employee. Then be sure to get the employee's signature. Sign it yourself and give a copy to the employee. Place your copy of the warning in the employee's personnel file. When a written warning does not result in the changes you expect, it's time to turn to the next step in the discipline process, suspension.
it easy. Hey, look, you go to your supervisor immediately. I'll call him in 5 minutes to make sure you're there. Go. All right. Just take it easy. There's enough trouble already. Now, let's go. Have a seat, Bill. All right. You know, I've warned you about your attitude before.
For Pete's sake, the guy's a jerk.
According to company policy, the penalty for fighting is a 2-day suspension. Now, you brought this on yourself.
It wasn't my fault.
Doesn't matter. The point is that there was a rule against fighting, and you broke it. Now, if you break it again, you're at risk of losing your job. Understand?
Yeah. I understand.
A suspension notifies an employee that you're not going to tolerate even one more instance of rule breaking. Time away from work without pay gives the employee time to think. An employee can decide whether or not he or she really wants to work for your company. But what if the employee doesn't heed the warning?
Hey, Brad, how you doing?
Hey, Andrea, you're back. How was Vegas?
It was fantastic. The shows were great.
Did you win any money?
Little.
I hope your luck holds out. Hal's been looking for you for 3 days.
Uh-oh. I hope I can talk my way out of this one.
Better think fast. Here he comes.
Hi, Hal.
Andrea, I want to see you in my office right away. In the past 2 months alone, you've been absent 8 times, and several of those were unexcused absences. Now you take off for 3 days, you don't even call in?
It was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to go to Vegas. I couldn't pass it up.
There are times when, despite your best efforts, an employee's behavior won't change and you have to resort to the ultimate step in the disciplinary process, firing. Generally, unless an exception applies, firing is appropriate only after all other steps in the progressive discipline process have been exhausted.
This time you have gone too far. We're going to have to discharge you.
Progressive discipline is more than just protection against lawsuits. It's a way to correct employee behavior and improve performance. When you use progressive discipline, employees are more likely to obey the rules, feel better about their jobs, and work more productively. And you don't have to rely only on gut feelings. You have a plan of action. In other words, you benefit directly. Employees benefit also. They gain a sense of security when they're treated fairly and consistently. They know where they stand, and they know just what's expected of them. Far from being the unpleasant, negative experience we used to associate with discipline, the progressive method of discipline is a positive tool which you can use to build a better workforce.